The sound that started it all wasn't a dog barking or a gate slamming, it was a high-pitched metallic whir-whir-whir that made me think someone was installing a sprinkler system at midnight. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when the noise cut through the quiet neighborhood air. At first, I thought it was coming from the house behind mine. Then came the crunch, followed by a faint but distinct giggle that could only belong to one person, Karen, my HOA president, self-declared moral authority of the cul-de-sac, and full-time destroyer of peace. I peeked through my bathroom window, toothbrush hanging out of my mouth, and there she was, flashlight strapped to her head like she was mining for gold, cordless drill in hand, leaning over the fence that separated our backyard. Each time she pressed the trigger, another hole appeared in the cedar planks I'd spent 2 weekends staining. She wasn't even subtle. Her tiny dog yapped beside her like a cheering audience. For a few seconds, I just stood there, trying to process what I was seeing. I'd known Karen had issues. She'd once measured my grass with a ruler and fined me for being half an inch over regulation height, but drilling holes into my property at midnight was a new level of crazy. I stepped outside quietly, not even putting on shoes, and whispered, "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She jumped, nearly dropping her drill. "Oh, Jim. You startled me. I was just, checking airflow. The HOA guidelines say fences can't block airflow between properties." "Airflow," I repeated. "It's a fence, not a wind tunnel." She gave that smug little smile that made my blood pressure spike. "Well, it could be a wind tunnel if you weren't so obsessed with privacy. Your solid fence is technically a visual obstruction, and I'm just making sure my garden gets enough sunlight and breeze. You should be thanking me." Before I could say another word, she turned her drill back on and poked another hole through my fence like she was decorating Swiss cheese. That was the moment I decided I was done playing nice. The next morning, I took photos of the holes, dozens of them, and marched straight to the HOA office. The office manager, a quiet guy named Brian who always looked like he wanted to retire yesterday, sighed the second he saw me. "Jim, let me guess. Karen. Bingo. She vandalized my fence. I want her fined, maybe banned from power tools for life." He rubbed his temples. "I'll file a report. But you know how she is, she's technically the president. She'll find a way to twist the rules." He wasn't wrong. By the afternoon, I had an email from the HOA citing me for having a non-compliant structure that lacked appropriate airflow between adjoining properties. I almost choked on my coffee. She'd managed to spin her vandalism into an official notice against me. So I decided to fight fire with color. That weekend, I hit the hardware store and bought 6 gallons of bright, neon paint, pink, yellow, blue, green, orange, and purple. My plan was simple. I'd fill the holes with silicone plugs, paint over them from my side, and wait for the sun to do its thing. What I didn't realize was that the cheap silicone I'd bought was slightly porous. A few days later, as rain hit the fence, the colors began to seep through the holes, onto Karen's perfectly manicured white garden wall. By Monday morning, her backyard looked like a unicorn had exploded. The white trellis, the potted plants, even the back of her patio chairs, all streaked with dripping, multicolored paint. It was magnificent. At precisely 7:15 a.m., I heard her shriek. It was the kind of sound you only hear in horror movies or when someone discovers they've lost Wi-Fi. "Jim, what have you done to my yard?" I walked out casually with my coffee. "Morning, Karen. Nice colors. Very modern art." She jabbed a finger at me. "This is vandalism." "Oh, you mean like drilling holes into someone's fence?" "That was different," she snapped. This is unneighborly." The neighbors began peeking out of their windows. One guy across the street whispered, "Is that paint on her bird bath?" Another laughed so hard he dropped his cereal bowl. Karen stormed off, muttering about lawyers and HOA regulations. I thought that would be the end of it, but she wasn't done. The next day, I noticed she'd hung a massive tarp along her side of the fence to block the paint. Problem solved for her, right? Except the tarp wasn't secured properly, and when the wind picked up that night, it came loose, dragging paint-soaked streaks across her lawn furniture. By Wednesday, her yard looked like a Jackson Pollock painting after a hurricane. Of course, she blamed me. I came home from work to find a bright orange notice of violation taped to my door. It said I had caused property damage through negligent paint management. I laughed so hard I nearly fell over. That evening, I sat on my porch and watched her scrub her patio with a toothbrush, muttering under her breath. Then she noticed me watching and shouted, "Don't get comfortable, Jim. You'll be paying for this." I smiled. "You might want to check the bylaws first. I think there's something about not altering someone else's fence without written permission." That shut her up, for the night at least. The next morning, I woke up to find my side of the fence freshly painted beige. She'd actually reached over and tried to cover my bright colors from her side. Unfortunately for her, beige mixed with my leftover neon made everything worse. Now it looked like melted sherbet. The neighbors started calling it the Rainbow Warzone. Someone even uploaded pictures to the community Facebook group, captioned, "When HOA enforcement meets modern art." The post blew up. Dozens of people commented things like, "Karen strikes again, and looks better than before." By the end of the week, the HOA called an emergency meeting. Apparently, the spectacle had attracted enough online attention that the local newspaper reached out asking if they could photograph the fence for a Suburban Art Feud feature. Karen tried to ban all photography, but someone pointed out that public view from the street was fair game. She nearly combusted. At the meeting, she slammed her hand on the table and yelled, "He's ruining property values." I replied calmly, "Technically, you started the airflow improvement project." The room erupted in laughter. Even Brian, the tired office manager, couldn't hide his grin. When the vote came to determine who was at fault, the majority sided with me. Karen was formally warned for unauthorized property modification. I didn't get fined. Instead, the HOA asked if I'd consider repainting the fence in a neutral color once the situation settled. I agreed, but only if Karen apologized publicly. She refused at first. Then, after another week of rainbow-stained flower pots and a yard that looked like a Skittles ad, she finally gave in. She knocked on my door one morning, holding a paintbrush like it was a peace offering. "I'm sorry," she muttered through gritted teeth. "Say it louder," I said, pretending I didn't hear. She glared at me, then sighed. "I'm sorry for drilling holes in your fence." "Apology accepted," I said with the biggest grin of my life. "Now, about that new color scheme." She groaned. "Please. No more rainbows." I nodded, but inside, I was already planning something. Because sometimes, karma doesn't need a hammer, it just needs a splash of paint. It started the next morning with a thud. A heavy one. The kind of thud that told me someone had just dropped something expensive and probably regretted it immediately. I peeked through the blinds to see Karen standing in her yard with a roll of black mesh netting taller than she was. She was sweating, muttering, and occasionally glaring at my side of the fence like it had insulted her ancestors. I took a sip of my coffee, leaned against the window, and watched the show begin. She unrolled the netting across her Rainbow Warzone yard, occasionally stepping in puddles of dried paint, which left neon footprints behind her. The plan, it seemed, was to cover her side of the fence entirely to block any more artistic contamination. Except she didn't seem to know what she was doing. Every few minutes, the net would collapse, tangling around her ankles. Her dog yipped and ran in circles, making things worse. I could have helped. I could have offered her a ladder or a few zip ties. But honestly, the sight was too entertaining. An hour later, I stepped outside to grab my morning mail. Karen froze mid-tug, her hair plastered to her forehead. "Don't even think about it, Jim," she snapped. "Think about what?" I asked innocently. "Whatever sabotage you're planning next. I know you're behind this mess." She waved a paint-stained glove toward her fence. "Do you realize what it's like to host a garden club meeting with this? This clown show behind me? I grinned. Actually, I was planning to compliment your color coordination. Very avant-garde. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're funny, don't you? I don't think, I said, walking back toward my porch. I know. I could feel her glare burning a hole through my back. I thought that would be the end of it for the day, but Karen wasn't someone who gave up after losing a round. She believed in revenge and spreadsheet. By the afternoon, I received another notice of violation. This one accused me of visual pollution and unapproved paint use. She even attached photos of her side of the fence as evidence. I couldn't stop laughing. The woman had basically documented her own crime scene. That night, I decided to even the playing field. I remembered something my cousin Dave, an ex-painter with too much free time, once told me. If someone messes with your paint, make it self-defense. I called him up, explained the situation, and within an hour, he was at my house with a mischievous grin and a trunk full of supplies. What's the plan? He asked. I don't know, I said, pacing the yard. Something that makes a point but doesn't get me arrested. Dave grinned wider. How about something washable, but dramatic? 2 hours later, we'd rigged a setup that would have made a prank show proud. We installed small spray bottles, filled with washable, non-toxic color dye, right along the inside of the fence line, hidden behind some potted plant. The nozzles faced Karen's side through the existing holes she'd drilled. Then we hooked the system to a motion sensor, the kind that triggers sprinklers. Basically, Dave said, any movement near these holes will trigger a rainbow burst. I couldn't stop laughing. It was petty, it was harmless, and it was poetic justice. The next morning, it rained lightly, and the air smelled of wet cedar and irony. Around 8 a.m., I heard Karen's voice again. Sharp, commanding, filled with the confidence of someone who's about to make a mistake. Come on, Muffin, go potty. I grabbed my coffee and peeked through the blind. Her little white dog trotted toward the fence, sniffing the ground. Karen followed, umbrella in hand. She leaned down to inspect the fence holes, probably wondering if she could plug them herself. And then, a fine mist of pink and blue shot straight through one of the holes, right into her face. She shrieked, stumbled backward, and dropped her umbrella. What in the... She wiped her cheeks, only to smear the colors more. From my porch, it looked like a toddler had attacked her with markers. I leaned against the doorframe, trying not to laugh. Everything okay over there, Karen? Her head snapped up. Did you do this? Do what? I asked, keeping a straight face. She stormed up to the fence, face glowing with streaks of pastel chaos. This fence is defective. It's leaking color. Maybe it's that airflow you were so concerned about, I said. She stomped her foot. You think this is funny? Extremely, I admitted. That afternoon, half the neighborhood came out to check on Karen. By check on, I mean they brought snacks and tried not to laugh while pretending to be sympathetic. The pictures started circulating online again. Someone captioned one, HOA president caught in Technicolor storm. Another one said, she wanted airflow. She got rainblow. Karen threatened to sue me for chemical assault, but when she called the police, even the responding officer had trouble keeping a straight face. He took one look at her rainbow-smeared patio and said, Ma'am, this appears to be the washable paint? Yes, but it's the principle, she cried. Right, he said. But you drilled the holes? Well, yes, but... Then technically, the paint came from your side of the fence into your property. That's not vandalism, that's physics. I nearly lost it. The cop gave me a subtle wink before leaving. Karen was left standing there, mouth open, holding a damp towel and a very confused dog. Over the next few days, the paint spray became local legend. Kids from the neighborhood called it the rainbow fence. Parents used it as a cautionary tale. Don't mess with Mr. Jim's fence, or you'll come home looking like a skittle. But of course, Karen wasn't done. A week later, she called for another emergency HOA meeting, this time hosted at her house. The invite email said, Urgent, Discussion on property contamination and neighbor misconduct. Naturally, everyone showed up just to see what she'd do next. Her patio looked like she'd tried to clean it with milk. Faded streaks of color still clung to every surface. She stood in front of a makeshift presentation board covered in printouts of my fence, red arrows, and angry handwritten notes like evidence and sabotage. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly brought out my own folder, a copy of the HOA bylaws highlighting the section about unauthorized property alterations. I read aloud, "No member shall modify or penetrate another member's property without written consent." The room went silent. Karen's face turned the exact shade of the pink paint she'd been hit with. That's out of context." Brian, the weary HOA manager, rubbed his forehead. "Karen, you drilled the holes." "They were for ventilation," she protested. "Ventilation," Brian repeated. "It's a fence, not an HVAC system." The room erupted in laughter again. Even the treasurer, who hadn't smiled in 3 years, chuckled. By the end of the meeting, the vote was unanimous. Karen was suspended as HOA president for misconduct unbecoming a board member. She nearly exploded. "You can't suspend me. I am the HOA." "Not anymore," Brian said tiredly. "Effective immediately." The look on her face was pure fury, like a balloon ready to pop. She stormed out, tripped on the netting she'd tried to install, and landed in a puddle of what was left of the rainbow runoff. It was poetic. After the meeting, neighbors came over to shake my hand. "You finally did what we all wanted," one said. Another added, "I'll never look at paint the same way again." That night, I sat on my porch, watching the sun set over the now famous fence. Dave called me, laughing so hard he could barely talk. "Dude, you're a legend. That video of Karen getting sprayed has 200,000 views." "Video?" I asked, blinking. "Yeah, someone's Ring doorbell caught the whole thing." I pulled out my phone and checked. Sure enough, there it was. Karen shrieking in slow motion as pastel mist filled the air. The comments section was brutal. "Taste the rainbow," one said. Another wrote, "This HOA meeting looks lit." Karen must have seen it too, because around midnight, she marched over and taped a furious note to my fence. "Delete the video or I'll call my lawyer." I smiled, sipping my late-night coffee. The note was already smeared with streaks of color where she'd touched the fence again. The rainbow, it seemed, had a sense of humor. And as I went to bed that night, I realized something. The war wasn't over yet. Karen might have lost the presidency, but knowing her, she'd come back swinging. But this time, I'd be ready, with a few extra cans of paint and a motion sensor that worked both ways. I should have known Karen wasn't done. A woman like her doesn't just lose gracefully and move on. She rebrands her defeat as a temporary tactical setback. I woke up the next morning to find her yard transformed into what could only be described as a counterattack in beige. The fence, the lawn furniture, even her flower pots were all freshly painted one single, soul-crushing color. HOA-approved desert sand. It was like she'd taken vengeance on the concept of joy itself. At first, I laughed, because how could you not? But then I noticed something strange. The fence looked wet. Not from paint drying, but from something dripping through from her side. I leaned closer, frowning. A faint chemical smell hit me, sharp enough to make my eyes water. She hadn't used regular paint, she'd gone industrial. That realization came seconds before the top layer of my carefully sealed fence started to bubble. The neon paint I'd used was reacting with whatever she'd applied, and by noon, my side looked like it had contracted some sort of rainbow rash. I was furious, but also, honestly, kind of impressed. Karen had escalated. Around lunchtime, I saw her in her yard, wearing oversized sunglasses and a sun hat, sipping lemonade like she hadn't just created a chemical weapons testing site. I walked over to the fence, arms crossed. "You realize you just melted half the paint off my side?" She smiled sweetly. "Oh dear, I must have accidentally used a solvent-based sealer. You really should have used HOA-approved materials." "Funny," I said, since your holes weren't HOA approved either. Oh, those were for ventilation, she replied smoothly. And this is weatherproofing. You wouldn't want your rainbow to fade, would you? The woman had the gall of a Bond villain. That evening, I called Dave again. She's escalated, I said. Oh no, he laughed. What's she done this time? Chemical warfare, I muttered. My paint's peeling like it's allergic to beige. Dave chuckled for a long moment, then said, You know what that means, right? We can't fight solvent with solvent. We need spectacle. I should have stopped him there, but the mischievous tone in his voice was contagious. By the end of the call, we had a new plan, something theatrical, harmless, but guaranteed to rattle her. The next afternoon, we went to the party supply store and came back with boxes of color powder. The kind they use in those color run marathons. Non-toxic, washable, bright as a neon sunrise. We filled up my lawn sprayer, added water, and created a rainbow mist mixture that would make any art teacher weep with joy. Our plan was simple. When the sun hit her side of the fence, the holes she drilled, which still leaked air, would create tiny bursts of airflow. We'd use a leaf blower to push the colored mist through. Nothing harmful, just enough to make her pristine beige look like it had caught a case of Technicolor measles. The next morning, I waited until Karen left for her morning jog. Well, more like a power walk with judgment. Once she was gone, Dave and I set everything up. He manned the blower while I aimed the sprayer. At the count of 3, we unleashed the rainbow. A shimmering cloud of pink, blue, and green mist puffed through the fence holes like a magical dragon breathing pastel fire. By the time we were done, her entire yard had a faint, sparkling hue. Even her gnome statues looked like they were in a disco. We high-fived, cleaned up, and went inside. The real fun began when Karen returned. I was sipping lemonade on my porch when I heard the first scream. GM. I turned just in time to see her standing there, hands in her hair, staring at her now glittery garden. What is this? I shrugged. Looks like the weather gods are in a festive mood. You did this, she shouted. Karen, I said calmly, if I did it, you'd have proof. You love proof. She ran inside and came back with her phone, snapping pictures furiously. This is vandalism. I'm calling the HOA. I smiled. Good luck with that. You're suspended, remember? The look she gave me could have curdled milk. By that evening, her backyard was the talk of the entire neighborhood again. Someone posted drone footage of the rainbow explosion online, and it spread like wildfire. The comments were merciless. At least she can't complain about airflow now, one said. Another read, Behold, HOA's new Pride Parade. The next day, a local news van actually showed up. I saw the reporter talking to a few neighbors, filming the fence, and even laughing. When they knocked on my door, I half expected to be in trouble, but no, they wanted an interview. So, Mr. Thompson, the reporter said, is it true this feud started over fence holes? Pretty much, I said. She wanted airflow, now she's got color flow. They aired it that night. Karen must have seen it, because 5 minutes later, I heard her slamming something heavy on her patio. I peeked through my window to see her dragging out a giant plastic sheet and stapling it to the fence like she was sealing off a biohazard zone. But nature, as always, had other plans. That night, a storm rolled in. Heavy wind, sideways rain, thunder that shook the windows. By morning, her plastic barrier had ripped loose, flapping like a giant beige flag of surrender. Worse, all the color powder had mixed with rainwater and run straight down into her flower beds, turning the soil streaky and bright. Her hydrangeas were now neon purple. When I went outside to get my mail, she was there, standing ankle-deep in mud, hair plastered to her head, staring at her psychedelic garden in silent horror. I gave her a friendly wave. Morning, Karen. Love the new color scheme. Her voice cracked. You've ruined everything. Technically, I said, you drilled the holes. I just provided airflow. That's when she completely snapped. Fine, she shouted. If you want a war, you'll get one. By noon, she'd ordered a massive delivery of materials, lattice panels, bricks, and what looked like a new security camera system. She spent the next 2 days constructing a privacy barrier 3 feet inside her property, parallel to my fence. It looked ridiculous, like a second fence built by someone who'd failed geometry. She even installed motion lights and a camera pointed directly at my yard. Every time I stepped outside, it blinked on like I was a zoo exhibit. I decided to use that to my advantage. One evening, while she watched from her patio, I set up a tripod and began painting the inside of my fence with invisible UV-reactive paint. Under normal light, it looked like nothing, but at night, under black light, it glowed like a rave. Karen noticed, of course. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "Home improvement," I called back. "That looks suspicious." "Not as suspicious as drilling holes in your neighbor's fence." She huffed and retreated indoors. That night, when her security lights turned on, the UV reflection from her own camera spotlight made my fence glow neon blue. Her beige wall behind it lit up like a nightclub. From the street, it looked like her yard was hosting a secret festival. By morning, everyone had seen it. People slowed down as they drove by, laughing, taking photos. Someone online dubbed it the Glow Fence Incident. The HOA inbox was flooded with memes. Karen was beyond furious. She marched over, waving a printout of the HOA bylaws. "This," she shouted, "violates Section 14, no artificial lighting displays without approval." "Then you'd better report your camera," I said. "It's the only thing lighting it up." Her jaw worked silently, like a fish gasping for air. You're impossible." I smiled. "No, Karen. I'm adaptable." The following week, the HOA officially banned unauthorized secondary structures and excessive surveillance facing neighboring properties, which meant her new barrier and cameras had to go. I swear I heard her scream from across the street when she got the notice. The day she tore down her extra fence, the neighborhood gathered to watch. People brought popcorn. Someone played circus music from a Bluetooth speaker. She ignored them all, but I caught her glaring at me, her face tight with restrained fury. When she was finally done, her once perfect yard looked like a war zone, muddy, streaked, littered with ripped plastic and broken stakes. As she stomped back inside, I called out cheerfully, "Need a hand repainting?" She turned and gave me the middle finger. It was the first genuinely human thing I'd ever seen her do. That night, I couldn't help but laugh as I looked out over the fence. My yard glowed faintly blue under the moonlight, peaceful, while hers was dark and silent. The battle might have been cooling down, but I knew Karen. She was regrouping, planning, waiting for her next strike. And somehow, that made it even funnier, because whatever she did next, I already knew one thing for sure. This fence wasn't just a boundary anymore. It was my battlefield. It was quiet, too quiet. That kind of eerie calm that usually comes right before Karen decides to ruin your weekend. After the Glow Fence incident, things had stayed suspiciously peaceful for almost a week. No emails, no yelling, no HOA notices, no chemical experiments in beige. I was beginning to think she'd finally accepted defeat. Then, on Saturday morning, I heard the unmistakable hum of a pressure washer. At first, I thought maybe she was cleaning her patio again. But when I peeked out my kitchen window, my jaw dropped. Karen was standing there, wearing goggles, rubber gloves, and a poncho like she was about to enter a biohazard zone. And she wasn't washing her patio. She was pressure washing my fence. From her side. The sound was deafening, and she was going at it like she was trying to strip paint off a battleship. Water sprayed everywhere, bouncing off the wood, soaking both yards. My morning peace died a noisy, soggy death. I marched outside, shielding my coffee from the mist. "Karen, what the hell are you doing?" She lifted her goggles, completely unfazed. "Just cleaning up your mess, Jim. HOA wants the neighborhood to look uniform again." "Uniform?" I yelled over the roar of the pressure washer. "That's my fence." "Technically," she said smugly, "it's a shared boundary structure. HOA Rulebook Section 9C. I was stunned. You memorized the rulebook? She smiled, teeth gleaming with victory. Page 72. Maybe you should read it sometime. I was 2 seconds away from losing it. You're destroying private property. Oh, relax, she said. I'm just removing unapproved coatings. Consider it a favor. The pressure washer made another pass, and I could see bits of color flying off. It was infuriating. That fence had survived rain, solvents, and even her tarp fiasco, but now she was erasing my masterpiece. I ran inside, grabbed my phone, and started recording. Karen, I said loudly over the noise, you are vandalizing my property on camera. She shut off the washer and glared. Oh, don't you dare record me. You're on my property line, I said, keeping the phone steady. If you keep it up, I'll send this straight to the HOA and the police. Her face turned red. You wouldn't. Try me. She hesitated for a moment, biting her lip, then threw the hose down in a huff. Fine. Keep your stupid rainbow fence. I hope it rots. And with that, she stomped off, drenched, muttering something about art crimes and idiot neighbors. I thought that was the end of it, but of course I was wrong. That evening, I was grilling on the patio when I noticed something odd. Tiny red dots moving across my yard. Laser dots. Coming from her direction. I followed them with my eyes and realized she'd set up laser levels, dozens of them, lined across her fence, pointing outward. She was measuring my property line. Again. I walked over. Karen, what are you doing now? She didn't even look up. Verifying boundaries. HOA bylaws allow it after any structural dispute. You might have encroached by an inch or two when you built your posts. My fence was here before you even moved in, I said. She shrugged. Then you won't mind if I check. I took a deep breath. Karen, if you touch my fence again, I swear. She cut me off. Swear what, Jim? You'll paint me again? I turned around before I said something that would have made me regretful later. But that night, I made a decision. If Karen wanted to play precision games, I'd give her something precise to measure. The next morning, while she was at her yoga class, which she bragged about to everyone within earshot, I and Dave got to work. We strung LED light strips along my side of the fence, color-changing, motion-activated, voice-controlled. When I clapped twice, the entire fence would glow like a carnival. But here's the best part. We programmed it to display a rolling rainbow pattern every evening at sunset. That night, when the sun dipped low and the first glow appeared, Karen came outside carrying her watering can. She froze mid-step. Her beige yard lit up in pulsing waves of color reflecting off the fence. It looked like her hydrangeas were hosting a disco. She screamed my name like a war horn. Jim, turn that off right now. I pretended not to hear her. She marched over, face redder than a stop sign. You can't do this. Why not? I asked. They're on my side. Solar-powered. Eco-friendly. HOA loves eco stuff, remember? Her jaw clenched. This is harassment. No, I said with a smile. This is ambience. The lights cycled through purple, green, and blue, casting a magical glow across her grim beige wall. She spun around and stormed back inside. 10 minutes later, the HOA email pinged in my inbox. Complaint received regarding light pollution. I replied with photos showing how subtle the lights were, plus a link to the HOA's own newsletter promoting creative outdoor illumination. I even added a note suggesting my lights could improve community morale. They sided with me again. That's when Karen snapped entirely. The next day, she installed mirrors. Full-length panels angled to reflect my fence away from her yard. It looked like she'd built an outdoor funhouse. Every time I walked outside, I saw 30 versions of myself staring back. At first, I found it hilarious. Then I realized one of her mirrors was angled toward my living room window. That crossed a line. So I called Brian from the HOA. Hey Brian, got a minute? He sounded exhausted. Jim, please tell me this isn't about the fence again. It's not just about the fence, I said. Karen's built a mirror wall. It's reflecting light into my house. He groaned. Good grief. I'll send someone to inspect. Again. By the time the HOA inspector arrived, Karen was in her yard polishing one of the panels. The man looked at her setup, then at me, and muttered under his breath, I'm too old for this. Ma'am, he said formally, these mirrors could pose a hazard. Sunlight reflection can damage neighboring property. Karen crossed her arms. They're art installations. He raised an eyebrow. Art installations? Yes, she said proudly. I call it reflections of harmony. The inspector scribbled something down. You'll need an art permit for that. An art permit? Section 11A.3, he said. Publicly visible installations require approval. Her jaw dropped. By sunset, she'd been ordered to remove them. I tried not to laugh when she dragged them back into her garage one by one, muttering under her breath about idiots with clipboards. But karma wasn't done yet. 2 days later, a storm hit hard. Heavy rain, strong wind, the kind that tears down branches and trashes patio furniture. I heard a crash around midnight and ran outside to see what happened. One of Karen's mirror panels, which she hadn't secured properly, had fallen and smashed into her garden fountain. The next morning, I found her out there with a broom, sweeping up glass, soaked and furious. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. When she saw me, she glared. Don't you dare say a word. I wasn't going to, I said. But for what it's worth, Reflections of Harmony had a short run. Her expression could have melted concrete. That afternoon, she posted a rant on the neighborhood Facebook group titled, Beware of Paint Vandals and HOA Hypocrisy. It was 5 paragraphs long and accused me of psychological warfare, harassment, and weaponized color projection. The comments section was brutal. Most people sided with me. Sounds like someone needs a vacation, one wrote. Another said, at least his fence makes the neighborhood look cheerful. Karen deleted the post within an hour. That night, she came to my door. For the first time ever, she knocked instead of yelling. I opened it cautiously. She stood there holding a paint roller. I give up, she said flatly. Let's repaint the fence neutral. Together. I was so surprised I didn't speak for a few seconds. You're serious? Dead serious. I can't take another week of HOA meetings, drone videos, or my hydrangeas glowing in the dark. I nodded slowly. All right. But we do it properly. Both sides, one color, no tricks. Deal. For the first time we actually worked together. She rolled paint on her side, I did mine. We didn't talk much, just the occasional grunt or sigh. When we finished, the fence looked clean, simple, and almost peaceful again. Truce? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Truce. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd reach the end of our ridiculous feud. But as I went inside that night, something nagged at me. Karen was too calm, too quiet. The kind of quiet that usually came right before another round. And when I woke up the next morning and saw the fresh sign hanging on her side of the fence, this property monitored by HOA enforcement drones, I realized the war wasn't over. It was just evolving. It started with a low buzzing sound, faint at first, like a giant mosquito that refused to die. I was halfway through trimming my hedges when I spotted it, a small black drone hovering lazily above the fence line. Its camera eye blinked red, tilting back and forth as if it were scanning my property. I didn't even need to guess who sent it. Only one person in this neighborhood would think aerial surveillance was a reasonable next step. Unbelievable, I muttered, dropping my clippers. Karen's gone airborne. The drone drifted closer, dipping low enough that I could see a tiny sticker on its side that read, Property of HOA. That part made me laugh. I knew for a fact the HOA didn't own drones. Karen had just labeled it to make herself sound official, like a self-appointed air marshal of the cul-de-sac. I grabbed my phone, started filming, and shouted, Hey, Karen! You lost your toy. Her back door slammed open like a gunshot, and there she was, striding out in her bathrobe and slippers, clutching a tablet that was clearly the drone controller. Her hair was still in curlers, but her expression was pure command mode. "Don't interfere with official HOA surveillance," she yelled. I nearly dropped my phone laughing. Official? Since when does the HOA fly recon missions? Since residents started hiding violations behind their fences, she snapped. I'm well within my rights to document non-compliance. Non-compliance with what? I called. Having good taste? Her face flushed crimson. That drone is recording evidence, Jim. Evidence of what, exactly? My lawn being greener than yours. The drone buzzed closer, hovering just over my deck. That was it. I grabbed my leaf blower, pointed it straight up, and let it rip. The blast of air sent the drone spinning backward like a drunken frisbee. It wobbled, crashed into her gutter, and fell into her flower bed with a crunch. Karen screamed like I'd just taken down a police helicopter. That's destruction of HOA property. It's destruction of your ego, I said, brushing grass off my shirt. You're welcome. She marched straight over to the fence, waving her tablet like a badge. You're paying for that. Sure, I said casually. Send me the invoice through your imaginary drone division. That night, I thought the madness might finally stop. But the next morning, I woke up to find 3 more drones hovering in formation over the neighborhood, one above my yard, one over the street, and one circling her roof like a confused pigeon. Karen had upgraded. By the afternoon, everyone in the neighborhood was talking about it. Kids were throwing tennis balls at the drones, dogs barked nonstop, and one guy actually came out with a pool net trying to catch one. The HOA group chat exploded with messages like, "Is this legal?" and "Who let Karen get a pilot's license?" Eventually, Brian, the exhausted HOA manager, showed up at her door. I was raking leaves at the time and watched the whole thing unfold from my yard. "Karen," he said wearily, "we've received several complaints about your drones." She crossed her arms. "I'm conducting compliance checks. The bylaws allow property inspection." "Inspections," Brian said, "not invasions of privacy. You can't fly cameras over private yards. They're not cameras, they're documentation tools." Brian sighed so deeply it could have powered a windmill. "If you don't ground them immediately, we'll issue a cease and desist." She gasped, offended. "Are you taking his side again?" "Karen," he said, pinching the bridge of his nose, "I'm taking the law's side." By sunset, the drones were gone. But the damage, well, the entertainment, was done. The entire neighborhood had been buzzing about it all day. Someone even started a thread on the local news site titled, "HOA President Tries to Police Airspace." The comments section was brutal. My favorite one said, "Next week, HOA builds its own satellite." Karen must have seen the post because she went completely silent for 2 days. I thought maybe humiliation had finally won. But then, on the 3rd night, around midnight, my security lights flickered on. I glanced at the monitor and nearly spit out my drink. There she was, standing by the fence, in her robe again, holding what looked like a giant garden sprayer. "Oh no," I whispered. I stepped out quietly and caught her mid-spray. A fine mist was drifting through the fence holes onto my side. "Karen!" I barked. "What are you doing now?" She froze like a kid caught with their hand in the cookie jar. Pest control." "At midnight?" "Yes," she said far too quickly. "There's been an infestation." "Of what?" "Common sense." She stomped her foot. "Don't mock me, Jim. You've been spreading color pollutants. I'm neutralizing them." "Neutralizing?" I took a step closer. "With what bleach?" She looked away. "You didn't," I said slowly. She said nothing. That's when I smelled it. Strong, acidic, unmistakable. Bleach. She was spraying bleach through my fence. I stepped back, holding my nose. "Karen, that's going to kill my plants." "Good," she snapped. "Then you'll learn to stop vandalizing property." I couldn't believe it. That's my property, you lunatic. Her face twisted. I have every right to protect my side of the fence. That's not protection, that's destruction. She threw the sprayer down and stormed off. I wanted to shout after her, but I was too busy making sure my shrubs weren't dying. A few leaves were already turning pale. I spent the next half-hour rinsing everything down with a hose, muttering every insult I could think of. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't letting this go. I went straight to the hardware store, bought UV paint again, this time in invisible white, and coated my side of the fence where she'd sprayed. When sunlight hit it, the chemical reaction made faint messages appear. By the next afternoon, Karen's side of the fence glowed faintly under the sun with big block letters that read, "Stop spraying bleach." The best part? She didn't notice until her garden club came over. I was sitting on my porch pretending to read when I heard one of them gasp, "Karen, why does your fence say stop spraying bleach?" Karen shrieked, dropped her watering can, and stared in disbelief. "It's vandalism. He's projecting it." Her friends tried not to laugh. One even said, "Oh, it's quite creative, actually." I nearly choked on my lemonade. Karen ran inside, grabbed a tarp, and tried to cover the words. The moment she did, the tarp caught the wind and blew halfway across the yard, wrapping around her dog. The poor thing yipped and ran in circles while she chased after it. By the end of the day, she'd completely given up on covering the message. For 2 glorious weeks it stayed there, glowing faintly every afternoon like the universe itself was tattling on her. Of course, she eventually filed a light pollution complaint with the HOA, but this time Brian just replied, "We don't regulate sunlight, Karen." She was defeated, but not for long. The next time I saw her, she was pacing by the fence with a measuring tape again, muttering to herself. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught phrases like new materials, private structure, and paint retaliation clause. I braced for impact. Sure enough, a few days later, a construction crew showed up. I walked outside as they unloaded lumber. "Morning," one of them said. "We're here for a new fence installation." "On her property?" I asked. "Yup. Says she's building a sound barrier." I laughed. "Good luck." Karen emerged, hands on hips, directing the workers like a foreman. "Make sure it's tall enough to block any future visual disruptions," she said, glaring at me. The irony was delicious. After months of complaining about airflow and open visibility, she was now building a 10-foot barricade. When it was done, I had to admit, it looked ridiculous, oversized, uneven, and somehow already leaning to one side. The HOA's rules limited fences to 6 feet, so I knew this one wouldn't last. Sure enough, by that weekend, she got an official violation notice. Watching her rip down her own overcompensating fence felt like poetic cinema. When she caught me smiling, she shouted across the yard, "You think you've won, don't you?" I shrugged. "I think I'm undefeated." She growled, grabbed her garden hose, and aimed it at the ground like she was threatening to water me next. I just waved. "Careful with that bleach sprayer." She turned away, fuming. That night, I sat on my porch, looking at the glow of the fading sun reflecting off my perfectly normal, neutral-colored fence. I thought about all the chaos that stupid wood barrier had seen, paint wars, drones, tarps, lasers, and couldn't help but laugh. Karen might still be plotting, but she'd learned one undeniable truth. Every time she tried to outsmart me, she just made herself the punchline. And in this neighborhood, being the punchline was the ultimate defeat. Sunday mornings used to mean peace and pancakes, but ever since Karen moved in, they felt like battle prep. I was flipping blueberry pancakes when I heard the sound of drilling again. Not the quiet, polite kind of drilling. The loud, determined, I'm up to no good kind. For one horrifying second, I thought she was drilling new holes in the fence. I ran outside, spatula still in hand, ready to defend my yard's dignity. What I saw nearly made me drop breakfast. Karen stood on her patio surrounded by PVC pipes, sprinkler heads, and a mountain of hoses. It looked like a low-budget plumbing apocalypse. Her dog yipped nearby, occasionally chewing on a pipe fitting. She noticed me and smirked like a general about to unveil her latest weapon. "Morning, Jim," she said sweetly. "Enjoying your weekend?" "I was," I said cautiously. "Until I saw you building whatever that is." She wiped sweat from her brow. "It's called a property irrigation and mist cooling system. Perfectly legal under HOA rules." I eyed the tangle of hoses. "Looks more like a water cannon." She laughed. "Oh, you're so paranoid. It's just to keep my garden cool during hot days." "Right," I said. "And those pipes aimed at my fence? Coincidence." "Sure." By noon, she had the whole thing rigged up. A neat line of sprinkler heads aimed perfectly along the fence line, my side. I knew that look in her eye. This wasn't gardening. This was revenge disguised as horticulture. I stood on my porch, watching. She turned on the water and smiled smugly as mist sprayed upward, and then directly through the fence holes. Within seconds, a light drizzle misted my yard. "Karen!" I yelled. "You're spraying into my property." She cupped a hand to her ear. "Sorry. It's the wind." "There is no wind." "Oh dear, must be airflow again." I clenched my jaw so tight my teeth hurt. The woman was unstoppable. Dave showed up that afternoon with a six-pack and laughed so hard he nearly choked. "You have to admit," he said between gasps, "the dedication is impressive." "I don't know whether to admire her or call an exorcist," I muttered. He wiped his eyes. "So what's the counterstrike, Commander?" I sighed. "Something clean. Funny. And this time, totally legal." That's when the idea hit me. If she wanted to spray water, I'd let her, just not the way she planned. That evening, I set up my own small network of motion sensors along the fence, hidden behind shrubs. I connected them to my outdoor smart system. If the fence detected moisture, it would trigger my speakers, blasting loud audio clips I'd preloaded. I had options like barking dogs, police sirens, and my personal favorite, a recording of Karen's own voice from an HOA meeting saying, "Respect your neighbor's boundaries." The first activation came early the next morning. At exactly 7:04 a.m., her system turned on automatically. Water sprayed, hit my fence, and tripped the sensors. A split second later, her own voice echoed across the neighborhood. "Respect your neighbor's boundaries. Respect your neighbor's boundaries." I heard her shriek. I was sipping coffee on the porch, trying not to spill it as she ran out in pajamas, frantically pressing buttons on her controller. The audio kept looping, louder each time. "Respect your neighbor's boundaries. Respect your neighbor's." She finally yanked the hose out of the main line, shutting the system down. The silence that followed was perfect. I could practically hear her fuming through the fence. An hour later, she marched to my front door, dripping wet and furious. "You hacked my system." I smiled innocently. "I didn't touch your system, Karen. Maybe your mist hurt your conscience." She jabbed a finger toward me. "You're mocking me." "I'm responding creatively." She stormed off, slamming her door so hard her wreath fell off. That evening, my doorbell rang again. It was Brian, the HOA manager, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years overnight. "Jim, I just need to confirm something. Did you record Karen's voice and play it through outdoor speakers?" "Of course not," I said. "That would be against HOA noise regulations." He sighed. "So it's a coincidence that her own system started shouting her catchphrase?" "Total coincidence," I said straight-faced. "Maybe divine intervention." Brian pinched the bridge of his nose. "I don't get paid enough for this." He left shaking his head. For a few blessed days, things went quiet again. But then, I noticed movement in Karen's yard after dark, tiny lights flickering along the fence line. I grabbed a flashlight and leaned out. She was kneeling with a paintbrush, muttering under her breath. "Karen!" I called. "Midnight Arts and Crafts?" She jumped. "Don't sneak up on people." I wasn't sneaking. I was checking for vandals. She gave me a glare. "You're the vandal. Then what are you doing?" Touching up. Touching up what? My side, she said. In neutral tones. I turned my flashlight on her fence. She'd painted over the lower half, in thick, glossy beige again, but with a twist. Written across the slats, faintly visible in moonlight, were the words, "Private property, trespassers will be reported." I laughed. To who? The fence police. Her jaw tightened. I mean it, Jim. I smiled. So do I. The next day I had a sign made. Simple, metal, weatherproof. I hung it on my side of the fence. It read, "Caution, fence may reflect stupidity." By evening, half the neighborhood had seen it. The laughter spread like wildfire. Someone took a picture and posted it with the caption, "HOA Karen's new nemesis speaks." It hit 1,000 likes overnight. The next morning, I found Karen staring at the sign like it was a crime scene. "You're mocking me publicly now?" I sipped my coffee. "I'm commemorating local history." She clenched her fist. "You're immature." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm having fun." She stomped off muttering something about legal action, but I knew that was empty. Everyone had grown tired of her antics. Even her garden club had quietly replaced her as president after the paint runoff scandal. Later that week, I noticed she'd started spending more time on her porch, reading quietly, ignoring me completely. I thought maybe, finally, she'd burned out. Then I saw it, one last act of pettiness. She'd planted tall shrubs along her side of the fence. Perfectly spaced, evenly trimmed, completely blocking her view of me. And I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Karen!" I shouted. "You finally did it!" She looked over warily. "Did what?" "You created peace." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Those shrubs," I said. "They're perfect. You can't see me. I can't see you. Everybody wins." For once, she didn't argue. She looked at her plants, then at me, and actually cracked a reluctant smile. Maybe we both got what we wanted. I raised my coffee mug. Cheers to that. For the next month, the neighborhood was blissfully calm. No shouting, no paint, no drones. The fence stood quietly between us like a peace treaty in wood form. The whole thing almost felt normal. Then came the neighborhood barbecue. It was held at the community park, and of course, everyone came, including Karen. She arrived fashionably late, wearing sunglasses and a big sun hat like she was a celebrity in exile. People whispered but kept their distance. Halfway through, someone handed me a burger and said, "Jim, you've got to see this." He showed me his phone. There was a new viral post online, HOA Karen vs. the fence, full timeline. It had photos, videos, even memes. Someone had compiled everything from the rainbow paint to the drones into one hilarious saga. Karen must have seen it too, because her face turned red as a tomato. "Who posted this?" she demanded. Nobody answered. She pointed at me. "You did this." "I didn't," I said honestly. "But I can't say I'm surprised it went viral." She huffed, grabbed her plate, and stormed off, muttering about defamation. When I got home that night, I checked the post again. It had already hit 500,000 views. The comments were merciless. "Jim deserves an HOA Medal of Honor. Someone make this a Netflix special. Rainbow Warzone forever." For the first time, I felt a little bad. She was infuriating, sure, but now she'd become a meme. The next morning, I left a small peace offering, an actual potted plant, on her porch with a note, "For your garden. No paint included." I didn't expect her to respond. But that evening, I found a note taped to my fence. It said simply, "Truce accepted." I smiled. Maybe the war was finally over. But as I turned to head back inside, I noticed her shrubs had grown unevenly. One was shorter than the rest. Through that gap, I saw her watching me. She gave a tiny wave, then grinned. Not a friendly grin. The kind of grin that said, "This isn't over, Jim." Not by a long shot. I laughed out loud. Because deep down, I knew the truth. Karen didn't want peace any more than I did. We both liked the battle too much. Monday morning came with the kind of deceptive calm that always meant trouble. The sky was bright, the birds were singing, and for once, my coffee didn't taste like stress. But peace never lasts long on my street, not with Karen lurking next door. It had been a full week since our truce, and part of me dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd decided to let it all go. Then I heard it. A distant rumble, mechanical, rhythmic. The unmistakable growl of an engine. At first, I thought it was just a delivery truck. But when the sound got louder, I looked outside and froze. A landscaping crew was pulling up to Karen's house. 3 trucks, a trailer, and a small cement mixer. "Oh no," I muttered. "She's building something again." Dave texted me 5 minutes later, "Bro, is she installing a moat?" I wouldn't have been surprised. By noon, the crew had dug a narrow trench along her side of the fence. Pipes, stakes, and cables snaked across her yard like a sci-fi set. I tried to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I wandered over, staying on my side. "Karen," I called, "you installing a car wash?" She turned, all business. "It's drainage." "Drainage," I repeated. "There's no water problem here." "There was when your paint runoff destroyed my garden," she said sharply. "This system will prevent future contamination." I stared at the trench. "That's not drainage, that's a miniature irrigation system. You're wiring it to something." She gave me that smug smile again, the one that had started this whole saga months ago. "Let's just say it's preventative maintenance." I sighed. Translation: "You're plotting something ridiculous again." She ignored me, shouting at one of the workers to angle the nozzles toward the fence line. I should have stopped her right then, but part of me wanted to see how far she'd go. By evening, her project was complete. A series of low-pressure spray heads lined the base of the fence, each connected to motion sensors. It looked harmless enough, until I saw the storage tank sitting beside her shed. It wasn't filled with water. It was filled with some kind of organic dye. Oh, she wasn't planning a paint war. She was planning revenge art. That night, Dave came over again, munching chips like it was movie night. "You gonna stop her?" "Nope," I said. "I'm gonna let her dig her own hole this time." He grinned. "That's new for you." "I'm evolving." The next morning, the trap was sprung, by her own dog. I was watering my tomato plants when I heard the hiss of pressurized spray followed by a loud shriek. I turned to see Muffin, the tiny white dog, running across her yard, completely splattered in bright green dye. Behind him, the motion sensors flashed as the sprinklers went off like machine guns, painting everything in sight. Karen ran out screaming, her robe already catching a mist of neon green. "No, no, no. Stop. Stop." I was laughing so hard I nearly fell over. Her yard looked like a nuclear swamp. The fence, her chairs, her potted plants, all dripping with slime-colored streaks. She fumbled with the control box, slipped on the wet grass, and fell backward into her own dye puddle. I lost it. Even her dog stopped barking long enough to shake himself off and spray her again. By the time she finally shut the system off, half the neighborhood had gathered to watch. Phones were out. One kid yelled, "She's turning into the Hulk." Karen scrambled to her feet, hair matted, robe ruined, and glared at me through the dripping chaos. "You did this," she shouted. "Me?" I said, grinning. "I've been standing right here the whole time." Her eyes narrowed. "You tampered with my sensors." "I didn't even know you had sensors," I said truthfully. The laughter from the neighbors broke whatever dignity she had left. She stomped back into her house, dripping neon trails behind her. Later that afternoon, the HOA email chain exploded again. Subject line: Green incident at Lot 24. Brian's message was short and exhausted. All parties are advised to cease creative landscaping activities immediately. Karen didn't show her face for 2 full days. When she finally emerged, her lawn looked like a crime scene cleanup gone wrong: patchy grass, stained walkway, and piles of ruined decor. I expected another explosion. But she just stood there for a long time, staring at the mess. Then something unexpected happened. She started laughing. Not the sarcastic laugh she usually gave me, the real kind. The kind that breaks tension. I walked over cautiously. "You okay over there?" She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I give up, Jim. You win. The universe clearly hates me more than you ever could." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? You've said that before." "No, this time I mean it," she said, still chuckling. "I built a self-painting fence. I think that's the definition of losing." For the first time since this whole war began, we both started laughing together. It felt weird, like petting a crocodile and realizing it's purring. "Tell you what," I said. "How about we call it even and actually fix this mess properly? I'll help clean up if you promise no more experiments." She hesitated, then nodded. "Deal. But you're not touching my hoses." "Fair." We spent the next few hours cleaning. It was awkward at first, but eventually we started talking like normal people. She told me she joined the HOA years ago because she felt lonely after her husband passed. The board gave her a sense of control, something to do. I told her I moved here to escape city chaos and just wanted peace. "Guess we both went about that wrong," she said. "Yeah," I admitted. "But at least it's been entertaining." By sunset, the yard looked halfway decent again. She even offered me lemonade, a real one, not a sarcasm-laced insult disguised as hospitality. For the first time in months, I actually believed the feud might be over. And for a while it was. Weeks passed without drama. The fence stood quiet, unpainted, unstained. Neighbors started calling it the peace line. The Facebook memes finally died down. Even Muffin seemed calmer. I almost forgot what chaos felt like. Then one Saturday morning, I found an envelope taped to my door. It was from the HOA. Inside was a letter, official letterhead, bold print. "Congratulations! You have been nominated for HOA president." I blinked in disbelief. Underneath, a note read, "Recommended by previous acting president, Karen Brooks." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. The woman who once declared me her mortal enemy had just nominated me to replace her. Later that day, I saw her in her yard, pruning her hydrangeas. I held up the letter. "You did this?" She smiled. "Consider it my peace offering. You're the only person stubborn enough to keep this circus in order." "Why me?" She shrugged. "You survived me. You can handle anything." I didn't know whether to thank her or build a bunker. At the next HOA meeting, Brian made it official. By unanimous vote, Jim Thompson is now our new HOA president. The applause was polite but genuine. Karen even clapped. When it was over, she leaned over and whispered, "Don't forget, Mr. President, boundaries matter." I grinned. "Don't worry, Karen. I've learned from the best." The months that followed were strangely nice. I cleaned up some of the HOA's outdated rules, including the ridiculous airflow clause. Karen attended meetings but stayed quiet, occasionally giving me helpful suggestions instead of threats. We even co-hosted the neighborhood summer picnic. But one evening, as I was locking up my shed, I heard that familiar whir-whir-whir again. My stomach dropped. I turned toward the sound and burst out laughing. It wasn't a drone this time. It was a toy helicopter, piloted by a neighborhood kid. Karen was sitting nearby in a lawn chair, waving lazily. "Relax," she called. "I've retired from aerial surveillance." "Good," I said. "Because I was about to issue a no-fly zone." She chuckled. "I think we've both done enough damage." Agreed. The sun dipped below the fence, the same fence that had started it all. In the golden light, you could still see faint traces of the rainbow beneath layers of neutral paint. A reminder of the madness we'd shared and somehow survived. I raised my coffee mug toward her yard. "To peace." She lifted her lemonade. "To color-coordinated chaos." We both laughed. As the night settled in, I looked at that fence and couldn't help but smile. It wasn't perfect, still dented, scratched, and weathered, but it stood tall, stubborn, and unbroken. Kind of like me. Kind of like her. And deep down, I knew something important. Even though our war was over, life in this neighborhood would never be boring again. Because when you live next to a Karen, peace is just the intermission.